Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SAG-AFTRA podcast. I'm Duncan Crabtree Ireland, National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator of SAG-AFTRA. Our guest today, Sean Astin, has spent most of his life in front of the camera, starring in beloved films such as The Goonies, Rudy, and, of course, the iconic The Lord of the Rings, and behind the scenes as a committed advocate for SAG-AFTRA and its members. And now he's leading our union as its newly elected president. At the recent biennial convention, Sean addressed the membership and laid out his vision for the next chapter of SAG-AFTRA. And I'm just so personally thrilled to have him joining us today on the podcast. Sean, welcome to the SAG-AFTRA podcast and congratulations on your election.
Thank you very much, Duncan. I feel like the words honor and a privilege are this kind of phrases that it gets used now and it just kind of goes by, but it is a genuine, I'm so proud of the fact that the members put their confidence in me, and I'm absolutely determined to earn it.
Oh, absolutely. And, I don't know if you'll remember this, but I do, because the very first time I ever met you was actually at the SAG Awards when the cast of Lord of the Rings was nominated for a SAG Award.
That's right. Would have been, you had a DVD you wanted autographed. I remember it perfectly clearly.
Now, as far as this role, the role of president of SAG-AFTRA, you've said that this role is life-defining. What does that mean for you?
Maybe I was meaning identity, a sense of identity, a sense of like who you are. My mother was president of this union, Patty Duke, in 1985 and reelected.
Can you tell the listeners, there's something you have in your office?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we have an historian for SAG-AFTRA that works here at headquarters, and she presented me when I walked into the office the first time with my mother's SAG-AFTRA president business card. And, it's like, thanks for having me here. Make me cry in the first second that I walk in here. Like, what about the strong face of the union and that you're supposed to be presenting? And it's framed now and it's on there. But because that is such an important part of her biography, she passed away about 9 years ago. For me to be the first, second generation president of the union, it takes everything that's led up to it. All the wonderful opportunities that I've had and the work that I've done and everything else, it sort of frames it in a different way. And this is true for all of us in our lives. Everything we do, everything that happened in our past is leading up to it. But this particular thing has consequence. The stakes are very high because the work of the union is to protect members and support members and often when they're at low moments in their life. So being aware of the importance and the relevance to our community's life, everything kind of leading up to that. And, there's so much that goes on in this world that we don't have control over. We're exposed to so much pain and suffering that's happening all over the planet in real time. And I think it can be overwhelming. It can make people, it can be really frustrating not to know how to help. But the idea that all of this work that I've done, that makes this role the place that I can have the greatest impact on the most number of people and help people's lives. That to me, it's identity shaping. This is, thousands of people who work regularly and pay close enough attention to what's going on at the union that they opened their ballots and they clicked a box and they said, we think this would be good for you to do.
We have a room downstairs, and you've been in it many times. I'm sure you've reflected on it, that at least I call it the Hall of Presidents. I don't know if that's what it's actually called, but it's outside of our James Cagney boardroom, and it has portraits of all of the presidents of Screen Actors Guild back to the original first president. And so as you look down that kind of curved hallway, there's a legacy that's present there. And I think, as you mentioned, for you, that's got to be special because you're the first person who, in looking at that legacy of prior presidents, one of them is your mom. I guess I'm wondering, what went through your head when you walked in there the first time after you were elected president, or how does that resonate for you?
Of course, I remember my mom's presidency, but to look at her portrait there, she looks so young. She's so beautiful. Just trying to wonder, like, whoever captured that drawing of her, whoever did that, what they saw in her that was reflected in how they depicted it, versus what I knew of her when she was serving when I was at home. I was a kid. I was probably 14 years old or something. And we would have, Kent McCord and all these, actors who I knew from television. You kind of watch your television, you turn and look in the living room, and they're all in the living room, and they're all, intense and focused, and sometimes it gets loud. And, my mom, who smoked cigarettes and had this like ability to whistle really loud, like kind of like a truck driver, like so loud that it would shut, like an entire room of people would shudder and turn and look at it. And she's only like 4'11". So, trying to wonder about that and just appreciating, and this has happened over my life and probably happens with most people with their parents, is like the older you get, the more their achievements mean to you. Because when you're a kid, it represents time away from your family. It was really kind of a grisly time when she was there. The board was a very contentious place, and so she's chairing these meetings, and I think people respected her, but it was hard. And she'd come home and she'd be wearing the frustration of those things. So, like, why is my mother having to experience this? But then you look at it, just admire more of what that achievement is. And I really wanted to understand her legacy at the union more. What did she do? Who did she help out? What were their job actions on her watch? I guess we moved our headquarters during her thing, and, seeing pictures of her in speech mode, watching member leaders really focused on and listening to her. And when I go around, people come up to me all over the country. People come up to you. I met your mom here, and I saw your mom there, and your mom meant this to me, and your mom meant that to me. And so to see her ensconced there on the wall feels good. I must say, Pam, our communications director, at one point, I think I'm like 45 days or something into this presidency, and I've been telling people it's the shortest 6 months of my life because we just it's been 24/7, which is great. I'm learning so much, and I like to say, we're moving a lot of energy around. But Pam was like, we need to do a photo shoot with you. So, but at one point she said, we're going to go into the Hall of Presidents, she called it to you. And they had the cameras already all set up when I got in there. And I went and I stood, but I looked over my shoulder, and they had framed it so that I was in front of Cagney, James Cagney, who that room is named after, the first president of the union. And I had a moment. All of a sudden I felt something pressing on my heart, like, whoa, the magnitude of the historical significance of becoming the president of this hallowed institution, which you're lucky if you get to do this, and the reason they started the union, right? The reason Cagney and was like Mary Pickford and people like that.
Ralph Morgan.
Oh yeah, Ralph Morgan. They saw circumstances that they didn't like. And I think it made them uncomfortable, because they'd be shooting on a stage and there'd be a performer sitting in makeup and, and wardrobe and, with having learned lines, and they're sitting there endlessly waiting to be photographed for an on-screen audition or screen test or whatever, and not getting anything for it. And, at a certain point, if you're the one who's, number one on the call sheet and you're looking over, you should start feeling a little crappy that that's the situation. And I think they must have. And so they got together a collective, and they went to the, head of one of the studios or something. They created this union. So to just know that this presidency of this term and everyone after is an heir to a tradition of people who put time, energy, effort, money, reputation into helping their colleagues. And so it just struck me at a moment, like I hadn't been taking it for granted, but I think I had gotten, I was coming to the office every day, and I was just getting into the rhythm of it. And, can I look at this document? Can I see this? Can we talk to that person on the phone? And all of a sudden, when you're the president of the largest labor union in the world, entertainment labor union in the world, people are willing to talk to you. People reach out to you. The heads of other unions, the heads of big organizations, diplomats and politicians, and so trying to make your way through that and figure out how to prioritize and how to make that work and stuff. And I think I had just kind of gotten into this routine, but then all of a sudden I'm in the Cagney room looking at the thing and realizing that I've been set on this mark and I'm being photographed for that reason. It was just like, whoa, yeah.
And it's a lot. I mean, you, as president, like you just alluded to it, right? As president, you have so many responsibilities. And I know your mom experienced that, and all the other presidents have experienced that. Of course, post-merger of SAG and AFTRA, that's an even broader representation than it would have been before that, because of the variety of media professionals and performers that we represent. And it's a huge responsibility. So you said it was an honor, which surely it is, but it's also an incredible gift, I think, that all of our elected leaders, but especially those who get elected president nationally of the union, give, because it is a huge undertaking, especially if you're doing it with a level of passion that, is, I think, probably coming through even through this podcast and the way you're describing it. I think the listeners would really love to maybe hear a little bit about what are your priorities as president. Like, what have you been thinking about that you want to put on the front of your agenda?
It's a lot.
Yeah, I know.
It's a lot. I know you know. I know you know. The things that you hear the most about that are on top of mind of performers, the thing that unifies everybody in concern is the health and pension plans. So I think given the state of healthcare in the country and the skyrocketing cost of care, of drugs or whatever, pharmaceuticals, as our plan has wrestled with it, and there's been a lot of drama associated with decisions that have been made by the plan. What the president can do, because I've also learned, like, the presidency has limitations, like it can't conjure dragons or something. Like, that's kind of a bummer. Like, I don't.
There's no magical powers.
There are magical powers, just not that they have certain corporal limitations. But a lot of our members don't understand that they're separate trusteeships that manage our health and that manage our pension plans. And so, but what the president is empowered to do in our Constitution is, I'm not telling you, but you know this, but for the members, is to bring to the board recommendations and to agendize items that the board can then act on that can be communicated to those plans. And I want to make sure that the board is as fully informed with as much detail as possible about, for example, who our trustees are. And I think I want to figure out what the full weight of my ability is and what's proper to be able to share with our board, and also to present options for them to consider on ways that we can improve it. And Duncan, I'll be looking to you, who is a trustee, to help me flush out exactly what those options are, because they are not as easy as some people might. It's very easy to say this is what should be being done. And a lot of people, they've been a member of this union for 40, 50, 60, 70 years. My dad's 95. He's a member of the union. And their relationship to the health plan is often just not what you would want or expect it to be. So doing whatever I can to help improve benefits, make it more accessible to people. Most of our people don't make the $27,000 a year they need to make to be able to qualify for SAG-AFTRA health. Trying to find a way to lower that. So whatever I can do, I've made a commitment to focus on that. And then our retirement plans, which, before merger, there was 2 plans, and after merger, there's still 2 plans. And I think at the very least, administratively, it's just not a long-term viable state of affairs. So in the same way as what is in my power to try and accomplish. And, communication is everything. You were talking about my passion for it. My passion has been manifesting itself with me wanting to communicate directly with every member of our 80-person board, every president of all of our locals, every chair of all of our 60 committees, like wanting to do Zooms with them, wanting to get buy-in from them and hear from them what their thoughts and feelings are, and hopefully get a kind of dynamic going where if we can start to think or feel through things that can improve the health and pension plans, we can get there. That it's not a situation where people who have long-standing pain because of their relationship to the plans, or long-standing philosophical approaches that may be great or they may not, they may be making it harder to develop and grow and adjust. So managing that process is I think it's one of the things I'm good at, because I'm willing to listen to people, and because to me, the focus is on like what's next, what's possible, how can it be made better, so that without eschewing the historical significance of everything that's come before. So there's that. Artificial intelligence is the other thing that I hear, and that the membership and every citizen of the country and human being around the world is really focused on. So, you and Jeffrey Bennett, our general counsel, and Ray Rodriguez, our political folks, Kerry, and our lobbyists, and people may not realize this. There is a lot of consternation, a lot of upset, a lot of feeling that the union does not understand the ethical ramifications of what artificial intelligence is doing. They don't like this idea that it's, a condition of employment. There's just an awful lot about artificial intelligence that is a pain point for people. We're existing in a culture where people are looking for places to fight back against this new technology. So for me, I want to say that their union is doing way more than they probably realize. That our command of this space relative to who we are as an organization, what industry we're in. I mean, I went to Sacramento and spoke about to 3 different subcommittees on the impact that artificial intelligence is having on the workplace. There are limitations. There is only so much we can do. And I think what I want to try and do is make sure that the membership understands the command that we have over it, and make sure that we understand that we don't know everything. And there are a lot of places where great information and great ideas are coming from within the membership that we need to be open to. We need to try and figure out how to blend those ideas with what we're doing. And then, the law, the public policy space surrounding artificial intelligence is massive. And we're doing great. Governor Newsom in the state of California has come to our headquarters. This is a state with how many millions of people, and a city with how many millions of people, and how many people are being affected by this. All of the workplaces in the country are being affected by this. He came to SAG-AFTRA to sign a couple of AI protection bills into law because we helped write it. And I want our people to know that that's what we're doing. We're working very hard on the No Fakes Act federally. And, I think this is one place where the kinds of political advocacy I've done and policy advocacy and work I've done is going to be something I can contribute when the system wants it, when it's appropriate. So those 2 things. There's other things. Our relationship with our agents, the talent agency, ATA, or the group that represents all the talent agents. We used to have a really good contract with them. We have not for, 20 years. That is a glaring problem. The people who work in this industry who are auditioning, doing their self-tapes, they're negotiating deals, they're whatever. One of the union's responsibilities is to have conversations with their agents that it's not comfortable for them to have. Not because they're not smart, not because they aren't willing to try and understand those conversations, not because they don't understand the immediacy of the impact that it has on them, but because they strategically assess that to have certain conversations with their agents might deprioritize their place in the pecking order at that agency. So our union has to go into that environment and represent them and ask the questions they can't ask and press the advantages that we actually have that aren't being pressed because we have a kind of asymmetric disadvantage. So that's one. The casting platforms it's outrageous the way the casting platforms behave, the sort of pay-to-play situation that we have to be in, and a whole host of other things. I know we started to get. I'm talking faster because I want to get a bunch of stuff in.
Yeah.
But
the passion is there.
Yeah, the passion. There's no question. There's passion there. But it's hard enough to develop a skill set and manage your own talent and your own persona, your own personality, your own life to be able to become a professional in this industry. But to have casting directors and agents operating in their self-interests and let their self-interest create the environment we have to operate in is against the natural order of things. We are powerful. Fran used to always say, we're at the center of the wheel. Or, the fact is, this industry goes nowhere without us. I don't care how powerful and how much capacity artificial intelligence creates. Nothing can replace the performer because our lived experience is real. Our hopes and fears and dreams and life is real. And the audience connects with that. And a lot of times I think when we talk about that, it almost sounds like, highfalutin artist talk. where it's not immediately accessible to people who really like sitcoms or people who really watch soap operas. But every single medium that we work with, every single discipline, whether you're a stunt person or background artist or singer, dancer, puppeteers, no matter who you are, what you're doing with your life is something that the audience is feeling. And that means something. And so we, the union, cannot allow ourselves for a moment not to step into the breach when our people are not being treated respectfully. We completely understand that we are auditioning. We completely understand that there's many other people who are competing for the same thing. We're prepared for the disappointment that comes with auditioning. What's unacceptable is to not get the fair look, is to send in a self-tape and have no reasonable expectation that they even watch it. It's demoralizing, it's dehumanizing, it's absolutely unacceptable. And so one of my major priorities of my time as president is going to be to go into this bizarre, matrix or disconnect where the agents and the casting directors and the companies, they sort of all, put their hands up, in terms of the negotiations and our contract language and everything else. Like, well, the casting people are there. They don't work. Yeah, no, they work for you. They need to make you happy in order for you to choose them again. So they may not be technically your employees according to some corporate standard and tax code or something like that, but we're not going to tolerate anymore whatever disconnect there is in those three groups ends up being paid for by our people. So that's something that's important to me. We have got to modernize this union. There's so many ways in which our organization has been growing and developing over time. We've just introduced the producers portal where producers who are trying to become signatory can get in there and have their process be a little bit more transparent to them. Things move a little quicker. They can track things. And that's great. I'd love to, and that's finishing its kind of beta form. I can't wait for that to get into full mode and whatever other areas, all of our contracts. But the other thing is our website. And, I think a lot of people experience frustration with the website, with its searchability functions. And, I know from being on the website redesign subcommittee that it's actually a much, much, much more complicated thing to improve than you might think. There are like 10,000 pages that it supports. It's enormous. Federal law, there's, you have to be careful with people's information when you're talking about it's financial stuff, information. But we know, we certainly know in our committee and have been actively involved in developing, we're in RFP process right now, trying to make sure that we work with the company that's best suited to help us move as quickly and successfully as possible. But from a member-facing kind of like, you want to know what I'm interested in, I want that website to be a home for every member. I want it to be a place that feels comfortable, where they can get to whatever information they want so they can expand their knowledge of the union, easily and comfortably, have access to, informational things and all the resources that we already provide. We provide discounts to people. We provide, and most of the stuff I find that people are frustrated with because they can't find it in a certain contract or something, they just don't know the URL for that page, or they just can't figure out the right combination of words. So we are going to make that better. And I will advocate to the board, whatever I have to do to help, whatever I can do to help the good people, the smart people who are working on it, to know that their union's behind them, because we want that resource. I'm going to do it. And then there's other aspects of modernization that you would think are just so easy, but they're not. Things like, having your dues be able to get paid, automatically to your scheduled Gs on your sign out sheets. Maybe that could be electronic option for you, or maybe the call sheets so that the location reps can be monitoring in real time without necessarily having to be, if they're covering a bunch of different things. So I would consider it a great accomplishment and great legacy for me if in the period of time after my presence here, you're like, wow, man, things really seem to improve. So I'll take credit for it, even if it was already in the process. But mostly, I just think we have an expectation. The members have an expectation. And given the size of our organization and the amount of stuff that we do, this is something we should be able to do well. And that's a priority for me.
So Sean, this is such great stuff. I really think we need to stretch this out and make it into 2 episodes. So I think what we should do is maybe take a little pause here and then come back with the next episode and just continue the conversation.
Sounds good.
The SAG-AFTRA podcast is produced and edited by Aaron Goddard and John Small. Supervising producers are Pamela Greenwald, Shira Reich, and Michael McNulty, with production and marketing support from Damon Romine, Jalika Conte, Delaney Howard, Brianna Wilson, Margot Giordano, May Wong, Raymond Hernandez, Leah Curtis, Joe Mulgado, and Maria Cabezas. The podcast is hosted by yours truly, Duncan Crabtree Ireland.